Welcome to the Scrollfire Podcast. I'm your host, Eliazar Seraphim. Tonight, we invite you into a powerful conversation entitled Conflict of the Kingdoms. Joining me for this discussion are our co-hosts, Sebastian and Megan Scott, as we explore one of the grand narratives of Scriptures, the story of divine purpose, human rebellion, spiritual conflict, redemption, and the ultimate victory in Christ. Together we will journey from the Garden of Eden through the fall, the nations, the wilderness, the ministry of Jesus, the cross, the resurrection, and the promise of his everlasting kingdom. This is more than a study of history. It's an exploration of human origin, identity, authority, and destiny within the greater story of God's kingdom. So wherever you're listening from, settle in, open your heart and mind, and join us as we enter into the conversation. This is the Scrollfire Podcast.
You know, when you look at a globe, there's this built-in expectation of permanence.
Oh, absolutely.
Like cartography feels like a settled science, you know? You see the solid black lines dividing nations, the distinct colors separating one country from another, and it just feels absolute.
Right, it feels safe.
Yeah, totally safe. A geography teacher points at the map and says, there it is, that's the border.
Yeah.
Your side, my side. It's clean, it's categorized.
Well, we take immense comfort in things being neatly defined, right?
Mm.
Treaties, historical conflicts, lines of latitude. It gives us this illusion of control.
The illusion of control.
Yeah, because if we can map it, we can manage it. But the moment you step into the ancient cosmic framework of what the biblical authors actually meant by the kingdom, that globe just shatters.
Completely shattered.
Yeah, the lines blur, the borders dissolve. You suddenly realize you aren't looking at a stable geopolitical landscape at all.
You're really not.
No, you are looking at an active, multi-millennial war zone.
And that is exactly what we are tearing into today. We are looking at a geopolitical and spiritual reality that, honestly, it completely redefines the ground we walk on.
It changes everything.
It really does. And I am talking directly to you listening right now because so much of the modern understanding of the kingdom of God has been, sanitized.
Very sanitized. We've reduced it to church buildings, right?
Yeah.
Or ecclesiastical titles.
Exactly. Or just general philanthropy, feeding the homeless, visiting people in prison. And I mean, don't get me wrong, those are vital, beautiful actions.
Well, they're essential.
But they are symptoms of the kingdom. They aren't the kingdom itself. What we are mapping out today in this deep dive is a cosmic reality. It is a systematic, aggressive reclamation of a hijacked world.
Right, because the overarching narrative here isn't the standard religious trope. It's not about humanity desperately trying to build a ladder to reach up to God.
Oh, no, not at all.
If you read the ancient texts through the lens of their original authors, it is a story of territorial conquest.
Territorial conquest. I love that phrase.
It really is. It's tracing a conflict between two highly structured, specific entities. You have the kingdom of the Most High and the kingdom of rebellion.
And what is just staggering when you actually dig into the ancient Near Eastern context and, the Second Temple literature is that they mapped this out.
Down to the smallest details.
Yeah, they mapped out the exact constitution, the hierarchy, and the tactical origin points of the enemy's kingdom.
Which means we have to talk about things that usually get glossed over in standard Sunday service.
Oh, definitely. We're getting into the weird stuff today.
We have to. We have to look at the supernatural events at Mount Hermon. The cosmic divorce
and
of
the actual origin of demons.
Right, the real origin. And we have to look at how Jesus' earthly ministry wasn't just a peaceful moral teaching tour.
It was a highly calculated military campaign.
Exactly. But before we get to the reclamation, we really have to establish what was actually lost.
Which means we have to go back to the original blueprint.
Eden.
Right, Eden. And Eden is where the modern misinterpretations usually begin, right?
Oh, almost always. Because the standard mental image is, a walled-off botanical garden.
Right, two naked people hanging out with some animals.
Yeah.
Very serene.
Right, like a lush park. But ancient cosmologies, particularly the Hebrew worldview, they didn't view Eden merely as a garden.
No.
No, it was a high mountain.
Okay, wait, hold on. A mountain. Because I've read Genesis a dozen times, and the imagery that always stands out to me is the rivers and the trees.
Sure, that's what we focus on.
Right. So where does the mountain concept come from? And why does that elevation matter so much?
Well, it comes from the broader biblical context, specifically passages like Ezekiel 28.
Okay.
Ezekiel explicitly calls Eden the holy mountain of God. And you have to understand, in ancient Near Eastern thought, mountains were the abode of the divine.
Right, because they reach up to the sky.
Exactly. They were the high places where the heavenly dimension, the spiritual realm, and the earthly dimension physically intersected.
Oh, wow. So they touched.
Yes. Eden wasn't just geography. It was a sacred, elevated space where heaven and earth overlapped perfectly. It was the command center.
So it's the nexus point.
Precisely. And from this nexus point, humanity was given an assignment. They were created to be imagers.
Imagers.
Yeah, the Hebrew word is selim.
Okay, let's unpack selim, because the immediate modern reflex when we hear made in the image of God is to think of like a reflection in a mirror.
Right, physical resemblance.
Yeah, we think it means we have 10 fingers and toes like God, or maybe that we have a capacity for rational thought or a soul.
Which is a fundamentally Western way of looking at it.
A post-Enlightenment way of reading an ancient text, right?
It is. Because in the ancient world, a king couldn't be everywhere in his empire at once.
Naturally.
So he would set up statues, images of himself in the territories he conquered.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right. That statue was a physical declaration. It said, I am the sovereign here, and my authority governs this space.
That is fascinating.
So when the biblical text calls humans the selim of God, it isn't talking about physical resemblance at all.
It's not about looking like him.
No, it is talking about constitutional reflection and proxy authority.
Mhm.
You are the living, breathing statue of the sovereign.
I really want you listening to grab hold of this. Being an imager means you are an authorized ambassador.
Yes.
You don't just wear the king's flag on a lapel pin. You are imbued with the king's authority.
You possess the king's mind on matters of state.
Right, and you have the legal backing to administrate new territories on behalf of the throne, which completely reframes the concept of stewardship, doesn't it?
It completely flips it on its head.
Because today, stewardship is almost exclusively a synonym for conservation. We think of recycling.
Right, taking care of what already exists. Don't ruin the park.
Exactly, but the original mandate given in Eden was about divine administration. The command was to subdue the earth.
Subdue it, meaning the area outside of Eden wasn't evil, but it was untamed.
It was wild, chaos.
It was chaotic, yeah. The mandate wasn't to stay on the holy mountain and just, maintain the garden.
Trim the hedges.
Right. The mandate was to push the borders of that garden outward, bringing that chaotic, untamed world into the divine order of the mountain.
So if I'm tracking the logical conclusion of this, if humanity had actually succeeded in this original blueprint, what would the globe look like?
Well, the borders of Eden would have expanded until they swallowed the globe.
The whole planet.
The entire earth would have become an exact reflection of the kingdom of the Most High. The overlap between the heavenly dimension and the earthly dimension would have been absolute.
Zero separation.
No separation. Heaven and earth unified, seamlessly administrated by human imagers.
Man, it's an incredible vision. A completely unified cosmic reality.
It is.
But delegating that much raw authority to humans, making them the literal bridge between heaven and earth, that creates a massive vulnerability, doesn't it?
Oh, huge one.
Because if you are a cosmic rival, an enemy of the Most High, you don't attack the throne directly. You attack the authorized imagers.
You compromise the proxy to steal the territory.
Exactly. Which brings us to the entry of the supernatural hijacker, the first great rebellion. Let's talk about this hijacker.
Yes, let's.
Because we need to strip away a lot of cultural baggage here. We are not talking about a literal, physical python hanging from a branch offering someone a piece of fruit.
No, the ancient texts are describing a completely different type of entity. We have to look at the Hebrew word used in Genesis, which is nakash.
Nakash.
Right. And while it can be translated as serpent, it is very often used as an adjective meaning the shining one.
The shining one.
Yes. And again, we look to Ezekiel 28 and Isaiah 14 to understand the profile of this being. This was a glorious, high-ranking, supernatural entity.
So not a ground-dwelling reptile.
No, a divine council member who, according to the text, walked among the stones of fire on the mountain of God.
A shining divine being. But wait, if this entity is so powerful, so high up in the heavenly hierarchy, why target the humans?
That's the million-dollar question.
Right. Like, why sneak into the garden and play mind games with Adam and Eve? Why not just rally a supernatural army and attack God directly?
Because the legal structure of the cosmos we just established.
The proxy authority.
Exactly. God had explicitly given the Dominion mandate, the keys to the earth, to humanity. The enemy couldn't just take the earth by force from the Most High.
He didn't have the legal right.
Right. He had to acquire it through the legally authorized stewards. He had to get humanity to willingly surrender the proxy authority.
You got to trick the middle management into handing over the passwords.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yes.
And the nature of his deception is just brilliant in its subtlety.
How so?
Well, he didn't offer them power or magic. He offered them autonomy.
Ah. Did God really say?
Yes. The Nachash planted the seed that God was holding out on them. That divine rule was inherently restrictive rather than life-giving.
Like, God was keeping the best stuff for himself.
Right. So the offer was self-rule. He essentially told them, you don't need to be imagers of the king. You can define good and evil for yourselves. You can be the kings.
And by accepting that offer of autonomy, humanity fundamentally voted God out of his own creation.
They chose self-rule.
And in doing so, they handed their stewardship over to the hijacker.
Exactly. And the sacred space is immediately compromised. Humanity is exiled from the mountain of God.
Pushed off the nexus point.
They are physically pushed out of that place where heaven and earth intersect. Death is introduced to the system, and creation itself is subjected to corruption.
But the terrifying part is what happens next. The enemy didn't just want to break God's toys. The goal was to establish his own rival kingdom, right?
He wanted to replace it.
The enemy wants to do exactly what humanity was supposed to do, but in reverse. He wants to extend his dark order throughout creation.
Which means the brokenness we see in the world today, the systemic corruption, it isn't just because humans occasionally make bad moral choices.
Right, it's not just us messing up.
No, it is the active, deliberate administration of a rival dark kingdom. Earth is an occupied territory.
The occupied territory. Wow. But the Most High didn't just abandon the project, did he?
No, he didn't. His immediate response in Genesis 3 was a declaration of war.
The proto-evangelium?
Yes, theologians call it the first gospel. God tells the Nachash that a future seed of the woman will ultimately crush the serpent's head, destroying his authority.
Even though the seed's heel will be struck in the process.
Right. It's a promise of a cosmic counteroffensive, but it's going to take thousands of years for that seed to arrive.
And in the meantime, the rival kingdom doesn't just sit still.
Oh no, they get busy.
The rebellion mutates. And this brings us to an era of ancient history that is almost universally ignored today.
Mostly because it makes modern readers uncomfortable.
Yeah, highly uncomfortable. But it is absolutely critical for understanding the spiritual mechanics of this war. I'm talking about Mount Hermon, the Watcher Rebellion, and the actual origin of demons.
So now we are stepping into Genesis 6 and the events that are heavily detailed in Second Temple Jewish literature.
Books like 1 Enoch, right?
Yes, 1 Enoch. And these are texts that heavily influence the worldview of the New Testament authors, like Peter and Jude. They reference them directly.
Okay, let's lay out the mechanics of this, because to a modern ear, this sounds dangerously close to Greek mythology.
It does sound like it.
Genesis 6 talks about the sons of God looking at the daughters of men and taking them as wives. Who are the sons of God in this specific ancient context?
Well, in the Hebrew text, B'nai Elohim refers to spiritual beings, members of the heavenly host,
Okay.
what the tradition calls watchers. These are angels who are assigned to observe and interact with humanity. But a faction of them, 200, according to the ancient traditions, decided to violate the divine boundaries.
And they didn't just float down randomly, did they? They chose a very specific drop zone,
They descended onto Mount Hermon.
which is such a brilliant dark inversion.
Exactly.
Eden was the mountain of God's holy intersection with earth. Mount Hermon becomes the mountain of supernatural rebellion.
It's a rival command center. It is the headquarters of the insurgency.
And what did they do once they set up this command center?
Their transgression was twofold. First, they taught humanity forbidden knowledge.
Like, what kind of knowledge?
Weaponry, advanced warfare, occult practices, cosmetics for seduction. They actively accelerated human corruption.
They gave humans the tools to destroy each other faster.
Exactly. And second, they hybridized with human women.
Okay, I have to stop you right there. Why?
it?
Yeah. What is the strategic value for a high-ranking spiritual being to hybridize with a human? Was this just base lust, or was there a tactical kingdom objective here?
Oh, if you view it through the lens of a cosmic war, It is a highly strategic move.
Okay, walk me through it.
Remember the prophecy in Eden that the seed of the woman would crush the serpent.
Right.
If you are the enemy, how do you stop a specific human seed from fulfilling that prophecy?
Oh, you corrupt the entire human gene pool.
You make it impossible for a pure human seed to be born.
Wow. You introduce unauthorized spiritual DNA into the immature bloodline?
Exactly. And the offspring of this unholy union were the Nephilim, the giants.
The Nephilim.
The ancient texts describe them as beings of immense physical size and insatiable violence. They devastated the earth. They were literally an insurgent army engineered to consume God's creation.
I always think of this like a rogue military unit going AWOL.
That's a good way to picture it.
Right. You have highly advanced special forces who cut off communications with Central Command. They drop into a remote province, set up a splinter cell on Mount Hermon, share classified weapons tech with the locals, and then start genetically engineering a super soldier army to hold the territory.
And that extreme escalation required an extreme response from the Most High.
The flood.
The flood, right. And here is where the mechanics are so important.
Yeah.
People often ask, why a global flood? Why not just strike them down with leaving?
Or call the water. But if the issue was the complete corruption of the human bloodline, the entire biome had to be cleansed to preserve the one remaining pure line.
Noah's family.
Noah's family.
The flood served as a reset of the imager mandate. It wiped out the physical bodies of the Nephilim. It destroyed the insurgent army.
But, and this is the absolute crux of the matter, the aha moment that completely reframed the New Testament for me. What happens to the spirits of these beings?
This is where it gets really interesting.
Because when a normal human dies, their spirit passes on according to the divine order, but a Nephilim is half celestial and half terrestrial.
They are a constitutional violation of reality.
Exactly. So when the floodwaters crush their physical bodies, where do their spirits go?
According to the ancient Jewish cosmology that the apostles operated within, those spirits couldn't move on.
They were stuck.
Because they were born of an unauthorized mixture of heaven and earth, they were rejected by both realms. They became trapped in the earthly dimension as disembodied spirits.
And these disembodied Nephilim spirits are the origin of what the New Testament calls demons or unclean spirits.
Yes.
I really need you listening to let that sink in. Demons are not fallen angels.
No, they're not.
The fallen angels, the Watchers, were imprisoned in darkness for their rebellion, as Peter and Jude explicitly write. Demons are a completely different class of entity.
They are the desperate, disembodied, traumatized remnants of a wiped-out hybrid race.
Which perfectly explains their behavior in the biblical narrative. Think about the mechanics of being a disembodied Nephilim.
It sounds horrifying.
You have the spiritual awareness and appetites of a celestial being, but you are trapped in a physical realm without a physical body to interact with it.
It is a state of perpetual agony and sensory deprivation.
They are starving for embodiment.
Exactly, which is why in the New Testament we constantly see unclean spirits seeking habitation. They need a physical vessel to experience reality and to manifest their corruption.
This makes the exorcisms in the Gospels so much more intense.
It changes the whole context.
Let's look at Mark 5. When Jesus sails across the Sea of Galilee to the region of the Gerasenes, he steps off the boat and is immediately confronted by a man living in the tombs.
Cutting himself, breaking chains.
Yeah, completely wild.
Oh.
Jesus asks the spirit its name, and it says, Legion, for we are many. And then they beg Jesus for something very specific.
Yes, they do.
They beg not to be sent out of the region, but to be sent into a herd of pigs. Now, I used to read that and think, why pigs? Why not just fly away and possess a king or something?
Right. Aim higher.
But if demons are the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, terrified of being cast into the abyss, they are desperate for any physical interface, a pig is better than the agonizing void of disembodiment.
It demonstrates the meticulous hierarchy of the enemy's kingdom, too.
Yeah.
You have the high-level, rebellious spiritual beings.
It's like the Nutchush from Eden.
The cosmic princes, yes. And then you have these ground-level foot soldiers, the demons, the unclean spirits, who are basically the miserable byproducts of the Hermon rebellion.
You really cannot understand the war if you don't understand the different ranks of the enemy.
You can't.
Okay, so the flood happens. God cleanses the physical earth. Noah steps off the ark. The Nephilim bodies are gone, leaving these roaming demonic spirits. But humanity was preserved.
A fresh start.
You would think after surviving an apocalyptic flood, humanity would finally submit to the divine order.
You would hope so. But the fundamental root of the rebellion, the desire for autonomy, it survived the waters.
It was still in the human heart.
And it manifested very quickly, leading to an event that triggered the most drastic cosmic pivot in human history.
We're moving to Genesis 11, the plains of Shinar, the Tower of Babel.
Yes, Babel.
Now, if you grew up with the flannel graph Sunday school version of the story, Babel is just a bizarre anecdote.
About ancient construction workers.
Right, trying to build a really tall brick building to touch the clouds, and God gets annoyed by their architectural hubris, scrambles their languages, and they all wander off.
It's treated as an etiology, a myth to explain why we have different languages.
Exactly, but that completely misses the absolute horror of what was actually happening.
Because the Tower of Babel wasn't an architectural problem, it was a theological rebellion.
How so?
The people gathered on the plains of Shinar to build a ziggurat. And in ancient Mesopotamia, a ziggurat wasn't just a tower to climb up to God. It was a fabricated sacred mountain.
Oh, an artificial Eden.
Exactly. They were building a localized nexus point to bring the divine down on their own terms.
Let us make a name for ourselves.
Yes, they were seeking self-glorification, absolute self-rule, and unity apart from God's mandate. Because what was the command after the flood?
To multiply and fill the earth.
To spread out and administrate the globe.
Yeah.
But they explicitly said, no, we are going to consolidate here in one place under our own authority.
It is the exact same lie that Natrash sold in Eden, but now it has scaled up to a mass societal level.
It's a societal rebellion.
And God's response to this is, it's chilling. He confuses their languages to disperse them, yes, but it isn't just a linguistic reshuffling.
No, there is a massive spiritual mechanic at play here.
And we only see it clearly when we cross-reference this event with passages like Deuteronomy 32 and Psalm 82.
We absolutely have to look at the Deuteronomy 32 worldview. Moses writes that when the Most High divided the nations at Babel, he divided them according to the number of the sons of God.
Hold on, stop right there. He divided the nations according to the number of the sons of God.
That's what the text said.
You're saying God handed over the geopolitical boundaries of the earth to other spiritual beings.
Yes, God essentially enacted a cosmic divorce.
A cosmic divorce.
He disinherited the nations of the earth. He said, in effect, if you want to be ruled by other gods, if you insist on seeking the divine on your own terms through these artificial ziggurats, I will give you what you want.
He gave them exactly what they asked for.
He divided humanity into 70 or 72 nations, depending on the manuscript tradition, and assigned a lesser Elohim, a member of the heavenly host, to steward each one.
I really want to push back on this because it sounds completely out of character for a God who supposedly loves the whole world.
I understand why you'd say that.
You're telling me God just gave up? He handed over the entire globe to a bunch of middle managers and just walked away. That sounds like a massive defeat.
But it wasn't a defeat, it was a judgment. It was the ultimate consequence of their autonomy. God gave them over to the very system they demanded. But, and this is crucial, he didn't abandon his plan for reclamation.
He still had a plan.
Immediately after the Babel incident in Genesis 11, what happens in Genesis 12?
He calls Abraham.
Exactly. God disinherited the 70 nations, but he immediately created a new 71st nation out of nothing.
A new subsidiary.
He kept Israel as his own personal portion. Through Abraham's line, God was going to build a new nation, and through that nation, the promised seed of the woman would eventually come to reclaim the other 70.
Okay, the corporate analogy really clarifies this for me. Let's look at it like a business. God is the CEO.
Yeah.
The employees, humanity keeps striking, trying to overthrow the company. So God franchises out the global branches. He hands the regional management of the 70 nations over to these lesser Elohim. He tells them, you manage these territories.
You want them, you got them.
But these middle managers go completely rogue.
They do. Psalm 82 gives us the direct indictment against them. Instead of stewarding the nations with justice and pointing them back to the Most High, these lesser Elohim became corrupt.
They took advantage of the power.
They accepted worship for themselves. They demanded sacrifices. They set themselves up as rival gods over these territories, ruling with chaos and oppression.
They slapped their own names on the regional branches and demanded the employees worship them.
That's exactly what happened.
And this explains so much of world history. It means that when you read about the ancient empires, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, Rome, these weren't just human political entities.
Not at all.
They were the physical manifestations of the corrupt spiritual powers governing them behind the scenes.
History is the physical shadow of a spiritual turf war.
That is a heavy sentence. Say that again.
History is the physical shadow of a spiritual turf war. Think about the book of Daniel.
Okay.
When Daniel has his visions, he sees the human empires as terrifying beasts rising out of the chaotic sea. He has seen the manifestation of these rogue Elohim driving human empires to devour one another for supremacy.
Which explains the incredible brutality of these empires.
And we see human rulers deifying themselves as a direct result of this spiritual backing.
Right. The pharaohs, the Babylonian kings, Julius Caesar, they genuinely believed they were divine because the corrupt spiritual entity operating their geopolitical territory was fueling that self-exaltation.
It was a symbiotic relationship of rebellion.
This is why human history is an endless cycle of empires rising, conquering with unimaginable bloodshed and falling. It's the 70 lesser Elohim warring over the map.
Warring for supremacy. But even in the darkest days of this cosmic divorce, the prophets held on to the promise.
They knew reclamation was coming.
In Daniel chapter 2, King Nebuchadnezzar dreams of a massive statue representing all these corrupt empires.
The head of gold, the chest of silver.
Right. And Daniel tells him that a stone, cut out not by human hands, will strike the statue, shatter it into dust, and then that stone will grow into a mountain that fills the whole earth.
A mountain that fills the earth. The restoration of Eden. The ultimate counteroffensive.
It was prophesied from the beginning.
For millennia, this rival kingdom held the nations hostage. The earth was a patchwork quilt of rogue spiritual territories. But then, the promised seed of the woman finally steps onto the battlefield.
And everything shifts.
And this brings us to the life and ministry of Jesus. Because if you take the framework we just built, Eden, the Nachash, the Nephilim spirits, the cosmic divorce of the 70 nations at Babel, and you overlay it onto the Gospels, everything changes.
It changes how you read every single page.
Jesus did not come just to be a moral philosopher. He did not come merely to teach us how to be nice to each other. He came to launch a full-scale, systematic territorial invasion.
And the gospel writers make this explicitly clear right from the start. Think about it. Immediately after his baptism, where God declares him the beloved Son, where does the Holy Spirit drive Jesus?
Straight into the wilderness.
And what is the wilderness in ancient cosmology?
It's chaos.
It is the desolate place, the chaotic domain, the territory of the enemy. Jesus purposefully marches straight into the enemy's stronghold.
Picking a fight.
And Satan approaches him with 3 temptations. The third one is the most revealing for our discussion today. Satan takes Jesus to a high mountain, shows him all the kingdoms of the world, and says, I will give you all this authority and their splendor if you worship me.
Now, in the past, I always read that as Satan just lying.
Most people do.
Right. I thought it was the father of lies bluffing with something he didn't even own. But based on the Babel event, he wasn't bluffing, was he?
No, Satan could legitimately offer Jesus the kingdoms of the world because he actually held them.
He was the legal manager.
Through the Babel rebellion, the cosmic divorce, and the corruption of the lesser Elohim, the enemy was the de facto ruler of the nations. It was a legitimate political offer. You can have the globe back right now without the cross if you just acknowledge my sovereignty.
We can bypass the pain. Just bow down.
Exactly. But Jesus refuses. Where Adam failed in the Garden of Eden and where Israel failed in their own 40 years in the wilderness, Jesus succeeds.
He refuses the shortcut. He refuses autonomy.
And from that moment on, every single action in his ministry is an act of calculated spiritual warfare.
Every miracle.
Every healing, every deliverance was a direct invasion of enemy territory. When Jesus heals a leper, he isn't just making a guy's skin better. He is aggressively pushing back the corruption and death introduced by the rival kingdom.
And when he casts out demons, those disembodied Nephilim spirits we talked about, he isn't just performing a magic trick to draw a crowd.
No, it's a legal eviction.
He is legally evicting illegal squatters from God's territory. He is taking the earth back one human body at a time.
And what's truly remarkable is that he delegates this authority. He doesn't just fight the war alone.
Right. He builds an army.
In Luke 10, Jesus sends out 70 or 72 disciples, which, by the way, is the exact number of the nations disinherited at Babel.
That cannot be a coincidence.
It's definitely not.
Yeah.
He sends them out 2 by 2 into the towns, and when they return, they are rejoicing that even the demons submit to them. And Jesus says to them, I have given you authority to trample on snakes and scorpions and to overcome all the power of the enemy.
Okay, let's connect the dots here because he is definitely not talking about desert wildlife.
No, not at all. The snakes represent the original Edenic rebellion. The Nakash, the high-level spiritual hijacker.
And the scorpions.
Scorpions are a well-known ancient motif for demonic forces, representing the hostile spiritual entities that came out of Hermon and Babel. Jesus is deputizing humans again.
Reauthorizing the imagers.
He is restoring the original imager mandate right there on the dusty roads of Galilee.
But the most profound tactical move of his entire earthly campaign happens right before he turns toward Jerusalem for the crucifixion. And it happens at a very specific geographic location.
Yes, the Transfiguration.
Let's talk about where the Transfiguration took place, because it absolutely blew my mind when I realized the geography. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John up a high mountain. Historically and geographically, which mountain was this?
All the textual and geographical clues in the Gospels point to Mount Hermon.
Mount Hermon. The exact same mountain where the Watchers descended to launch their genetic insurgency in Genesis 6.
The literal headquarters of the enemy's splinter cell.
It is an act of supreme cosmic provocation.
Yes, it is.
Jesus marches up to the gates of hell, to the epicenter of supernatural rebellion. He stands on Mount Hermon and he transfigures. He shines with uncreated divine light, revealing his true glory. And the voice of the Father thunders from the cloud, "This is my Son, whom I love. Listen to him."
It's a declaration of absolute ownership.
Jesus is standing on the enemy's front porch, kicking in the door and saying, "I am the true Lord of this mountain, and I have come to take it back."
Which perfectly sets the stage for the ultimate confrontation, the cross.
Now, I have to be honest. If we are using a military conquest model to describe Jesus' ministry, a crucifixion looks like an absolute failure.
It looks like the ultimate defeat.
It is the most humiliating, agonizing execution method the Roman Empire, one of those corrupt beast empires, could possibly devise. How does the cross function as a victory in this cosmic war?
To understand the mechanics of the cross, you have to look at the Old Testament blueprint provided in Leviticus 16, the Day of Atonement.
The two goats.
Exactly. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest would take two goats. The first goat was sacrificed to purify the sacred space, the tabernacle, from the sins of the people.
But the second goat wasn't killed on the altar.
No. The high priest would lay his hands on its head, symbolically transferring the sins, rebellion, and the chaos of Israel onto the animal. And then this goat, the scapegoat or the Azazel goat, was led out of the camp and released alive into the wilderness.
Into the chaotic domain of the enemy.
Yes, it was a way of sending the sin back to where it came from, sending it back to the rival kingdom.
So how does Jesus fulfill this?
He fulfills both rules simultaneously. He is the sacrificial lamb that atones for humanity, purifying the imagers. But he is also the Azazel goat.
Oh, wow.
He willingly allowed the full weight of human rebellion, the consequences of the fall, and the chaos of the cosmic divorce to be placed upon him. And then he was taken outside the city walls.
To Golgotha.
He descended into death. He marched right into the heart of the enemy's territory.
The powers of darkness thought they had won.
They celebrated.
Paul writes in 1 Corinthians that if the rulers of this age, those corrupt spiritual powers, had understood God's wisdom, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. They thought they had finally killed the promised seed of the woman. They thought the prophecy of Genesis 3 was dead.
But it was a trap.
A trap.
By absorbing the full penalty of sin as an innocent, perfect human, Jesus completely disarmed their legal claim over humanity. The enemy's power was rooted in the law of sin and death. When the debt of sin was paid, the enemy's authority evaporated.
He turned their perceived victory into their ultimate crushing defeat.
Exactly.
And the resurrection on the third day is the public announcement of that victory. The seed has crushed the serpent's head. The keys to death and Hades have been taken.
The territory is legally his again.
And this brings up a detail in the timeline that we usually rush right past. In modern Christianity, we go from the manger to the cross to the empty tomb, and then boom, we're done.
We skip to the end.
But Jesus didn't ascend immediately. He spent 40 days on earth after the resurrection. What was he doing during that time? According to the book of Acts, he was speaking to the disciples about the kingdom of God.
He was debriefing his generals. He was training his newly authorized imagers on how to administer the reclaimed territory.
Which leads us to the final piece of this puzzle, the event that proves the cosmic divorce is over, Pentecost.
Pentecost is arguably the most profound synthesis of all these threads. To understand Acts chapter 2, you have to read it as the anti-Babel.
Okay, let's hold these two events up against each other. At Babel, in Genesis 11, humanity tried to unify apart from God, building an artificial mountain. God responded by confusing their languages and scattering the nations.
He handed those 70 nations over to the corrupt, lesser Elohim.
But at Pentecost, the disciples are gathered in Jerusalem. The Holy Spirit descends with tongues of fire, a sign of divine presence. And what happens? nations.
The disciples stumble out into the streets and begin preaching. But they aren't speaking Hebrew or Aramaic. They are empowered to speak in all the languages of the known world.
And Luke, the author of Acts, specifically notes that there were Jews gathered in Jerusalem from every nation under heaven. He lists all these regions: Parthians, Medes, Elamites, residents of Mesopotamia.
He is geographically mapping out the dispersed nations from Babel.
And they hear the gospel in their own native tongues. It is the exact reversal.
God is using language not to scatter and divide, but to gather and unite.
Pentecost is the divine public declaration that the cosmic divorce is officially over. The period of exile is finished. The 70 corrupt Elohim have been legally defeated at the cross. Their illegitimate rule is shattered, and the Most High is calling the nations back to himself.
This is why Christ's final command in Matthew, the Great Commission, makes so much sense.
Go and make disciples of all nations.
Right. All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations.
It is not just a polite request for evangelism. It is a military mandate.
It's an invasion strategy.
It is the active deployment of imagers to cross the borders of the defeated Elohim and plant the flag of the true king. All authority in heaven and on earth. The dominion lost in Eden has been fully reclaimed by the Son of Man. The mountain of God is growing.
It is expanding again.
So let's bring this massive cosmic reality down to the ground. You are listening to this right now. Maybe you're sitting at your desk, driving to work, or folding laundry. What does this ancient supernatural war mean for your average Tuesday afternoon?
The practical application of this cosmology is immensely freeing.
Freeing.
Yes, because for so many people, engaging in the kingdom of God feels like a frantic, exhausting endeavor. We think spiritual warfare is about yelling at demons, running up and down church aisles, or maintaining a fever pitch of emotional intensity to prove we are spiritual.
We act like the outcome of the war depends on how hard we pray.
But the New Testament paints a completely different picture of your position. The Apostle Paul writes in Ephesians that God has raised us up with Christ and seated us with him in the heavenly realms.
Seated with.
Think about the mechanics of that. When Jesus finished his work on the cross and ascended, what did he do? He sat down at the right hand of the Father.
You don't sit down if the war is still hanging in the balance.
Exactly. You sit down when the decisive victory has been won.
Therefore, you are already operating from a place of victory, not fighting for it. You don't have to generate the power, you just have to occupy the territory.
You hold the ground.
This changes everything about how we interact with the darkness in our world. There is this concept of the power of presence. As a restored imager of God, as a living, breathing asylum, your mere presence in a room, in a toxic workplace, or in a broken family dynamic is a violent threat to the kingdom of darkness.
You don't have to scream at demons to be effective.
Yeah.
Simply existing in the full knowledge of your kingdom authority, understanding your position as seated with Christ, and living a life of integrity, love, and justice administers God's rule.
So just by being there.
Yes. When you bring order to chaos, when you forgive an enemy, when you refuse to participate in systemic corruption, you are extending the borders of Eden.
You are pushing the mountain outward. The enemy knows he is defeated. The dark kingdom is terrified of you because you carry the spirit of the one who crushed the serpent's head. You are the living proof that their reign is over.
You are the physical evidence of their defeat.
We have covered a tremendous amount of history and theology today. From the sacred mountain of Eden to the genetic insurgency of the Watchers at Hermon, the tragedy of the cosmic divorce at Babel, and the ultimate brilliant reclamation campaign of Jesus.
It's a huge narrative arc.
But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought. I want you to take everything we've talked about and apply it to the world you see outside your window right now.
The modern map.
If the events of Pentecost officially signaled the end of the lesser Elohim's legitimate rule, and if the Great Commission is the active, ongoing gathering of those scattered nations back into one unified kingdom under Christ.
And what does that mean for today?
What does that actually mean for the geopolitical borders we obsess over today? What does it mean for the cultural divisions, the ethnic tribalism, and the violent nationalistic conflicts that dominate our news cycles? Are we, as a global society, constantly fighting, hating, and dying over imaginary lines drawn by a defeated kingdom?
A profound question. When we elevate national identity above kingdom identity, we risk worshiping the ghosts of Babel.
The ghosts of Babel. Think about that the next time you look at a globe or a map, those borders, the solid black lines and the different colors. They are temporary. They are the fading scars of a cosmic divorce that has already been reversed.
They hold no eternal weight.
You are an imager of a mountain, and that mountain is destined to grow and grow until it fills the entire earth. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep exploring the texts, keep asking the hard questions, and keep extending the borders of the kingdom wherever you walk today. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Scrollfire Podcast. A special thank you to Son, Sebastian, and Megan Scott for being part of our discussion as we explored the conflict of the kingdoms and the unfolding of the story of God's redemptive plan from Eden to the reign of Christ. Our hope is that this conversation has encouraged you to see Scripture as one unfilled story. One unified story. A story that reveals the purpose of God, the victory of Christ, and the calling of every believer to live from that reality. If this episode blessed you, be sure to share it with a friend, subscribe, and follow for future conversations. You can find the Scrollfire Podcast on Spotify at Scrollfire Podcast and on YouTube at Scrollfire Publishing. Thank you for joining us.